Hey guys, Adam aka CS Radical here, and welcome to a bonus Radical Rant Podcast specifically for the Stone Cold Steve Austin podcast with Vince McMahon, live on the WWE Network on Monday night after Raw. We're going to talk about a bunch of things that Vince happened to say during this interview. We're also going to have the clips of these little bits and pieces that I want to go over, because that way you guys can, if you haven't heard the podcast already, at least you can hear these clips and kind of see where everything is coming from. So there was a whole lot in this interview, and this was a lot better than I think any of us ever thought it was going to be. We all kind of assumed that, you know, it was going to be a safe interview. It wasn't going to be very questioning or whatever else. But no, this was a legit interview, and some of the answers we got were very surprising, especially to me. Some of the stuff that we heard of, I didn't even think we'd get a word out of, let alone an actual answer and with some, you know, substance to it. So let's start right off with it. The first clip I'm going to play, it's going to be Stone Cold's essentially asking, what's changed with wrestling, and Vince still, even to this day, and we all know that he still is kind of embarrassed almost by the idea of being called wrestling. So here's the idea of what he was saying on the podcast.
You always like to listen to your crowd. Are you giving the crowd what they want? Because I just got finished watching 3 hours of live sports entertainment / pro wrestling. Where I come
That's
from.
Sports entertainment. That's not where you come from. You know, pro wrestling is, what my dad did. Come on.
How did pro wrestling segue into sports entertainment?
I've seen you play the guitar. I've heard you sing.
That was under the sports entertainment umbrella.
Of course.
When I got in the ring, I wrestled a 20 by 20 squared circle.
Absolutely, did you?
Well, I don't know if Vince really realizes it, but the majority of what happens on that television show is still professional wrestling, and that is that is essentially what people are coming to see. If he really thinks that we're coming here to see the fart jokes and all the comedy scenes and the storylines can make a wrestling match that much better. But it just goes to show you how, and I'll probably be talking about this all through, but clearly Vince has completely lost touch with what made him and his company the juggernaut that they are today. Obviously, with all the investors and the sponsors and everything else, clearly there's been a change, because obviously a lot of people, they're just as embarrassed about wrestling as he is. And I guarantee that a lot of these sponsors would have never signed on to WWE if they knew that it was just pro wrestling, but Vince started marketing it as sports entertainment. A term that will forever be kind of like something that you spit, in the face of every time you hear that word, because it's just like, that term is just death to this industry. Because clearly when you go watch an independent show, or you watch, what's going on in New Japan, like, that's fucking pro wrestling, and it is really good, and it's much better than what WWE is putting on, because WWE unfortunately can't seem to figure out that sports entertainment, yeah, you are more than welcome to add some of that flair to it, but the problem is people are there to see the wrestling. If they really just wanted to see your sketches, they'd watch any other fucking show that's out there, because they can do that better than what wrestling does. That's why people watch WWE. They watch it for the wrestling. They don't watch it for the story. They don't watch it for the angles. They watch it for the wrestling, because if they wanted to watch the story, they go watch Walking Dead. They go watch Game of Thrones. They go watch True Detective, all that shit. They would never come and watch WWE Raw because of that. The next clip we're going to talk about is Stone Cold asks Vince, since there's no major options for the talent to go to, I mean, obviously TNA is not doing so well, and I mean, they could go to New Japan, but there's a slim chance they ever do that. So we asked Vince what he thinks.
There's really no other options, than the WWE out there, really, when you think about it, to make a living. There's other, you got TNA and other guys, but I'm talking about the big leagues. This is it.
Sure.
It seems to me guys and gals backstage are walking on eggshells. They're trepidatious. They're a little afraid to really go out on a limb, because there is no other option. And if they piss somebody, if they tick somebody off here, well then, there goes their career.
Well, don't piss anybody off.
I mean, that line alone kind of really spelled it out for me, because we hear so many stories about how a lot of guys get put in the doghouse because of either something they say on the internet, because of something they do, because of all this other shit. I mean, obviously, the best example I can pull out for you right off the bat is Zack Ryder. Zack Ryder got himself over on the program with his YouTube channel and stuff, and he got the slight push, but clearly they didn't want to push him, even though that's what the fans wanted. And we've also heard stuff like Dolph Ziggler got himself into the doghouse a lot. I mean, obviously Cesaro right now, he's doing nothing, so we're all wondering what the fuck did he do, because they were pushing him for a while. It's a mixture of so many things. I mean, when Vince says don't piss anybody off, at the end of the day, though, is that really a good thing to do business? Just because somebody pisses you off that one time, that all of a sudden he's not allowed to get anything out of it? And clearly, if the fans want to see that, shouldn't you be putting that person in the forefront? I mean, it's common fucking logic. If the fans are clamoring for this guy, you keep giving him to them until they're sick of him. And you give it to him properly, because obviously what they did with Zack Ryder is clearly they didn't want to push him, so they pushed him for a moment, got the fans to buy the merch, got the money out of them, and then slowly started to kill him off to make the fans not want to see him anymore, because hardcore fans like me wanted to see him even through all that shit. And then eventually, once all the casual fans got rid of it, because the casual fans, no offense to most people that are casually watching the business, you guys don't spend nearly as much time, and you don't have the desire to watch everything as much as the other person does. And Vince will comment about that way later in this, where he talks about how obviously there's the people that tune in and out. For the hardcore fans, we love Zack Ryder, and it didn't matter what they did. We kept wanting to see him. To the casual fan, when they see him lose constantly and see him in stupid angles, of course that'll make them not care, because the fans, they don't watch it that much. So they want the time that they do spend on it to be really well written, really well done. And when WWE, in my point of view, especially with the Ryder angle, intentionally mess with somebody's push so that fans will stop liking that person, that kind of takes away the idea that no wonder they walk on eggshells, because they're afraid if they do one thing wrong in front of the wrong person, they're fucked. So, speaking about the guys that are walking on eggshells, Vince also comments about currently what the roster situation is like now, with how they're just with how he believes they are in terms of their ability and their mentality towards things.
This is a different group of guys and gals. It's millennials. You know, they're not as ambitious, quite frankly, and they're not trepidatious at all. I just don't think they necessarily want to reach for that brass ring. The last person who really reached for that brass ring, in all likelihood, was John Cena. Now, there are others coming up now who definitely want to reach for it. Ambrose is one of them. Seth Rollins is another one. Roman Reigns is another one. Bray's another one. So I think you've got some people here who are chomping at the bit to make a difference. But when you're walking around, you know, backstage, you don't hear as much, you know, camaraderie perhaps and laughter as in your era.
Shenanigans.
But then again, you know, there's some other things that they do. You know,
but you just said this locker room wasn't as ambitious as the one I was in.
I would suggest that's correct.
Why is that?
It's a different, again, I said it's millennials. It's a different point of view. Well, if you reach for that brass ring and you fall on your butt, no one wants to fail. And there's this feeling that, you know, this insecurity that if you fail, you're exposed.
Right.
So, I think that's largely pretty much what it is.
It is not because they're afraid that if they fail, they're exposed. They're afraid if they fail that they have nothing left, that they're done. Because clearly the way that this business has treated a lot of their talent is that the second you screw up in WWE, there's a pretty good chance you're never going to get up there again. That's why you hear a lot of the guys who are just, they're quiet and they don't say shit, because they're happy to be there and they figure they're making really good money, so they don't care if they're not in the main event. They don't care if they're not, you know, in the high-profile matches. They're just like, I got the job and I'm working at the place I wanted to get to. I don't want to lose this. That's why they're afraid of failing, because they're afraid if they fail, that's it for them. Their career's over. At least in terms of being in the big spotlight, they're done. I mean, they could obviously go back to the independents. They could go to TNA. They could go to New Japan. They could do all these other things. But at the end of the day, if they fail, there's really no chance in hell, for lack of a better, you know, pun, that they're ever going to be able to see that spotlight again. Because we have seen so many guys come and go, and you know that they're never coming back. There are so many guys that have come up from the developmental system, and they get their, like, couple of months, and then all of a sudden they disappear, and you knew that they were never coming back. I mean, I'm convinced that even though he was really good, Chris Hero, who was Cassius Ohno in the FCW days, because that was before NXT, I don't think he'll ever be back. I mean, there's so many other guys that fall into that category. The other thing that kind of drove me nuts is when he said Cena was the last one to grab the brass ring. Not like there was a guy after him that not only, you know, beat him several times for the title and then outsold him in merchandise. CM Punk also grabbed that brass ring. What the problem is when he says Cena was the last one to grab the brass ring, it's because he was the last one that they let grab the brass ring. Obviously, CM Punk was not given the brass ring to grab. He literally had to go and steal it and then force them to give him what he wanted so he could give them back the brass ring. That's essentially how I feel that it was with CM Punk. Because he had that whole speech in his documentary about how the brass ring is bullshit. And to say that John Cena is the last one to grab the brass ring, what does that say about your company then? It shouldn't be an indictment on the wrestlers, because if you're saying Cena was the last one to grab the brass ring, that's almost a decade ago that this has been. So you're telling me that for almost 10 years, no one's been good enough to grab the brass ring? Does that not say something about the way that you guys might be handling things too? Because it can't just be the talent, because clearly before John Cena, you had no problem finding new people to grab that brass ring. You had the Triple H's, you had the Rocks, you had Stone Cold, you had all these guys, like Mick Foley too, and Kane even, in a sense. You had all these guys that did get to the top, that did get the fans to go crazy about them. And there have been so many people in this industry, like I can give you a bunch of examples too, that of guys that, they won't ever consider being part of it, but they grab the brass rings. Edge, for one thing. Like, I can't believe he believes that Cena was the last one. What about Edge? Edge is a giant name in this business. You got guys like Jeff Hardy, who the fans were dying to see every week. You have guys like, oh God, who else can I just bring up off the top of my... Well, even like Alberto Del Rio had his moments where people were going like crazy for that. Obviously, Dolph Ziggler, I feel, has grabbed the brass. Like, when he won his first title by cashing in the Money in the Bank, like, people flipped at that. Or no, that might not have been his first time. It might have been his second. I can't remember. But when he did that, everybody was freaking out and loving every moment of it. The problem is they won't let them grab the brass ring. They won't give them the chance to grab the brass ring. It's always been about Cena since he became, the big player. It never was about anybody else. CM Punk had to force their hand because he was going to make so much money off of them after he had left, with all the interviews he would have been doing, all that other shit, but they had to do it, and they finally pushed him. They gave him a year-long title reign. But at the end of the day, they still don't consider him grabbing the brass ring. Then what the fuck does a person have to do to fall into that category? Speaking of people I think at one point could have been grabbing the brass ring, let's talk about Cesaro. Claudio Castagnoli, for the Independents, for those who don't know, but Cesaro, he had his moments after he broke up with the Real Americans, and he went out and was kicking ass. Was just a fucking monster with the giant swing and everything else. And fans were loving it. The fans were digging every moment of it. And then all of a sudden, he got stuck with Paul Heyman, and everybody was like, perfect, that's it. He's getting the rocket boost now. And then that didn't go very well for whatever reason, and then now we see him losing every night. So Austin asked Vince, I should say, about, what he thought about Cesaro at this point in time.
I was just talking to Cesaro backstage.
Right.
Guy with a lot of physical skills, strong dude, great in-ring work. What's the one piece where he's not connecting?
He's not connecting yet. We hope he will. I mean, he doesn't quite have the charisma. Doesn't have quite the verbal skills as well. It may be because he's Swiss. I don't know in terms of the European style.
That kind of just made me go, whoa. Because he's Swiss? Or because of the European style? I don't see what the problem was, because clearly he was over. And for Vince to say something like that pretty much tells me that he doesn't have an actual answer for why, because he doesn't want to tell them what the actual answer is, which is probably either he said something to someone that pissed him off, whether it's one of the writers, whether it's one of the producers, or maybe he just doesn't like the guy because, when he wants the big guys, he wants his big guys. He wants the guys that he made, like the Roman Reigns, which again, like I said last time when I was talking about the Punk interview, I have no problem with Roman Reigns. But in the sense of WWE's been always living in this idea that they make the talent. And Cesaro is a guy that made himself over, the 10 years that he spent in the business already. He made his name. It's like how, like, a lot of us are unsure about how guys like Kenta and Prince Devitt and Kevin Steen and all these other guys are going to do in this business. Like even El Generico is Sami Zayn now, right? We don't know how these guys are going to do, because we almost fear that they're going to do poorly, because WWE's going to hate the fact that they didn't make these guys. That these guys made themselves, and they picked them up when they were a big name. And you hear it all the time in the documentary with CM Punk, and I hate to keep going back to it, but it just works so well for everything I'm talking about. He said that they hated the fact that he was already a big star going in, that they like to push the guys that they make. That, you know, he didn't come from the machine like John Cena did and all these other guys. So when Vince wants to talk about Cesaro like that, and he did end up like just saying like, I don't have the answers on what to do to help him. You know, I just think he just you know, we got to get the fans to love him more. The fans were way over on him already. They took the giant swing away from him once he stopped using the swing and then started losing all the time. Again, like what I said with Zack Ryder. Once you take away the things that the casual fan was enjoying, and then the guy starts losing every week, of course they're not going to care about him anymore. So it had nothing to do with, you know, him being Swiss or anything like that, because I think he's a fine talker normally. It has to do with how they stopped pushing him for whatever reason, and they made the fans just stop caring about him. And of course, like I said, I've been talking with CM Punk for a while, so Austin also begs to ask the question, you know, do you want to talk about him? And here's what Vince had to say.
You want to talk about CM Punk?
Only from a standpoint, or first thing, I would like to do this. I would like to apologize. Sometimes in a big corporation, the legal people don't necessarily know what talent relations are doing, and conversely. And Punk got his severance papers, moreover, on the day he got married. And that was coincidence. So I want to personally apologize for that. Other than that, the only thing I want to say about Punk is that there have been a number of individuals in the past who have been disgruntled, said a lot of things about the organization, and I'm not going to, you know, wash the dirty laundry in public. I don't think there's any reason for that. I think that there are a lot of things that he may say that he may regret one day in terms of looking back at it. But nonetheless, I hope that one day, you know, we'll be able to get back together again.
Now, unfortunately, I feel like we're never going to see him come back to the business because, like he said in his interview with Colt Cabana, which also, if you didn't hear, or if you haven't listened to the podcast, he will be doing another one on Wednesday with Colt that's going to be answering a lot of fan questions, so stay posted to that. But I'm not sure. I mean, obviously, with both sides of the story, you never know what's going on, and I imagine with a big company, it always could have been coincidence that they got the papers on the wedding day, but it just seemed like when Punks talks about in the interview that he did with Colt Cabana that 2 days before his wedding, he got a text from Triple H saying, do you want to talk? Excuse me. And he said, I would love to talk, but I'm getting ready for my wedding and my honeymoon. I will totally call you and talk with you guys, you know, as soon as I'm done. But just so you guys know, I was always available to talk. And then it just so happened that 2 days later, he got his firing notice, you know? It tells me that really, like, there's no way that when the guy says, I'm happy to talk, just give me a little bit more time so I can enjoy my wedding and my honeymoon because I already got this on my mind. And then they still fired his papers. So obviously, I mean, if Triple H was calling to say that he was fired, then at that point he should have just told Punk, okay, you know what, then I'm just going to get it over with. Like if Punk was saying, look, can we just talk on my honeymoon? Like, because I think it was a text, right? I mean, at that point, if Punk had said that, then Triple H should have been the better man. If he was already fired at this point, he should have been the better man to just say, look, okay, fine. If you're not going to ask for it now, I might as well say it. Well, you know, it's still here. We're firing you. Here's the heads up. But again, like Punk said, he obviously didn't want to do that because Triple H hated him. And the idea that it was just a coincidence that it happened to be on those days, it may have been, but at the same time, they still did it during the point that his wedding was coming up, and they knew that because AJ still works for WWE, so they knew it. So if you're telling me that 2 days before his wedding they were going to fire him, at the end of the day, you were still going to fire him just before his wedding, and doesn't make it any better than you firing him on his wedding day. So for Vince to say that you know that was just coincidence and that he's sorry, I don't know if I can really believe that because at the end of the day, you still fired the guy around the same time as his wedding, regardless of whether the papers were supposed to be filed at a later date or not. It doesn't make any difference. When he also says, though, that he would love to still work with him some more, again, I don't think that's ever possible now because I'm pretty sure out of everybody in this business that has said he's never going back, I'm pretty sure Punk's going to commit to those words because the only way I can possibly think of Punk ever saying yes to coming back is if literally the entire company is completely renewed to the sense of no McMahon is even in the company. Like, it's been sold off. Like, Vince isn't there, Triple H and Stephanie aren't there. Like, Kevin Dunn isn't there. All the writers aren't there. Like, it would literally have to be a brand new version of WWE, completely brand new for him to even remotely think about it. But, I mean, I guess it's... Well, Vince is a businessman at the end of the day, so for him to say that I would love to see CM Punk back together, it keeps people intrigued because you never know, right? So that's all I think he was doing, is he was just getting the business side of him out of the way, just saying, look, we're just going to apologize, so it looks like we're trying to be the nice guys, and by saying we would love to have him back, I guarantee you they wouldn't take him back anyway. So I don't know about that. So next, Austin asks about the streak ending, the Undertaker streak.
One of the guys that when I was making my rounds, when I came back and apologized to, was The Undertaker. Been around a long time. He was a guy, stand-up guy, leader of the locker room, and had a hellacious run. And I remember being down in New Orleans, there at number 30, and I was watching the match in the truck with Kevin Dunn, and beer in each hand. And this was a match that I had to watch. I got two badass competitors in the ring, and Brock Lesnar and Undertaker, and I had to see the finish. All of a sudden, man, I'm watching that referee hits a 3 count after that third F5, whatever it's called, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I was like that guy in the front row. His eyes got this big. I was that guy in the truck.
Right.
I said, holy smokes, what just happened?
Right.
How, when, and why was the decision made to end the streak?
Well, no one wants to give back to the business more than The Undertaker, more than Mark Calloway. And he knew it's important to give back to the business. There comes a time in which it's time to do that. So why not then, when you consider, okay, who else was looking down the line, when you look at the talent roster, who else possibly could Undertaker work with, and at that time give back in the biggest possible way he could to help someone be a star. When you look at that talent roster, who was it going to be? There was no one on the roster, potentially. In the following year, or the year after that, it was timing. And the one person whose time was there at that moment, who Mark thought, okay, this is it, that'd be Brock.
Come on, dude. You can't tell me Undertaker made that decision.
I made that decision.
Okay, you made the decision. Okay,
absolutely,
I thought you were saying he was serving himself up.
No.
You're giving a story about, okay, guy's been around a long time. He's finally
and no one wants
back.
to give back more than The Undertaker, right?
Now, I was okay with this. I mean, obviously it was a shock at start. And for him to say that, look, there's nobody that was ever going to be on the way up in the next few years that was going to do it. And we all know The Undertaker, clearly after this last match that he had, was a broken mess. Like, not in the sense of, like, drugs or anything. Like, literally, he was just getting really old. And, his body can't take the bumps that he can anymore. And it sucks that it had to end. If it was up to me, I still would have just had him leave undefeated, like have him retire undefeated. 30 would have been a great one to retire at. Like, look, it's the 30th WrestleMania. This is what would have been 22-0, I think. So I mean, what's wrong with him being undefeated? Like, that's what I never understood. It's like the streak would be something. I know that everybody's like, well, they always got to have somebody to break it, so that way that person gets the rub. But we always had that argument that with Brock Lesnar, it was like, this guy's already been made. He already is a star. What are you really rocket shipping on this? Like, what is this boost for Brock Lesnar? It doesn't really, because we already know he's a big name. That's why everybody was like, man, like CM Punk could have used that, or one of the guys from The Shield. There's so many guys that could have benefited from it. And they wasted on a guy who, quite frankly, already had the rocket ship and was long past. So it seemed like a pointless thing. I'm at least happy to know that while Undertaker was under the impression that, okay, if there was anybody that I think at this point out of all the guys I faced that could do it, this could make sense, and then Vince just finally admitted that he was the one that pulled the trigger, because we've always been asking that question as well. So speaking of Brock Lesnar, then we had to ask the question of, what did we think about Lesnar being the champion and not being on TV because of his contract only allowing a certain number of dates?
Okay, you've got Brock Lesnar, badass dude, big cat, very physical, great success here, tries to play a little pro football, goes to UFC, has success there, comes back to the WWE, success. He's a world champ. He's not around.
Right.
Where is he? Can we not have him on television more than we have him on?
I don't think you want him on television.
Why not?
More than you have him. Well, because he's a special attraction.
He is.
You know, when you see Brock Lesnar, you know, it's almost like when, if you recall, Jake the Snake Roberts, when he first came into the ring and he brought this big python. Oh, my God, that was like, give you the willies just watching on television. But he did it week after week. No fault of Jake's, because he was booked on television. After a while, it's like Jake wasn't special anymore, because he bring out the snake and you know, become jaded as human beings and what have you. So Brock, per the contract we made with him, you know, only allows us X number of dates. So to me, it's not about the title. It's not about the title that draws people into the arena. It's about the performer and about, you know, his opponent and about the story, you know, and how they're going to resolve that story. So it's not really about the title, and only, you know, that's, you know, I mean, does it help sometimes? Sure it does, but it's not just about the title.
Can I ask the question then, if it's not about the title, why would you put the title on him then? Because clearly, if you're saying it's a special attraction, I mean, when Andre the Giant was a special attraction, did he have the belt? And if he did for very long, no. It's such ass backwards to say something like the title, you know, it's not about the title, it's about the attraction. Well, the attraction has the title, and the attraction is not on TV ever. We have not seen him since the last match against Cena, where Seth Rollins interfered. We have not seen him since then. He has the belt, which means we have not seen the belt in over a month. Now, it's one thing when we talk about the old days where, you know, obviously Ric Flair, when he was a champion, he would only defend the title, you know, at major events, and, you know, he wasn't always on TV. Yes, but at the same time, he was still there showing up every once in a while with promos. He was still showing up there with appearances and whatever. I'm not saying Brock Lesnar needs to be on Raw every week, and I'm not saying he needs to be on house shows. I'm not saying he needs to be on Main Event or SmackDown or whatever. He just needs to be there. It's like I would say every other Raw, maybe even once a month if you really want to go like that, but he, in some retrospect, even if it's just a video that he's shooting from his house with Paul and just talking about how I'm the champion, deal with it. We're not seeing him, period. We saw Paul obviously on Raw last night just talking about things, but we didn't see Brock, we didn't see the belt. So again, we're in this idea that, yeah, he's a special attraction, but he also has this belt that is supposed to be the biggest thing in this business, and everybody's supposed to be shooting for it. Well, if the guy only has X number of dates and he's not going to show up for every pay-per-view, how would I feel as a wrestler thinking that not only now is my chance even more limited to, you know, being able to challenge for the belt because he's only there for X number of times, which also reduces my chances even further because there's all the other guys that in this span of 3 months or however long it takes for him to come back onto pay-per-view so he can wrestle, you know, how does that make me feel as a superstar? Because now there's pretty much no window of opportunity for me because right now it's pretty much all Cena. So for me, what the hell is my chance of ever getting a title shot out of this? It's ludicrous to me. And I don't understand the thought process behind that. He never should have had the belt, and if he was, they should have pulled him aside and said, look, can we just sign a little an extension to the contract so we can get you on a couple extra dates so that way you can defend this all the way up to WrestleMania? Because we're still all assuming that WrestleMania will be when he drops it to whoever the fuck. Hopefully not CM. Speaking of WrestleMania, WrestleMania will also be when the Hall of Fame is. So Austin decided to quickly ask Vince, you know, since we had the documentary about the Macho Man Randy Savage recently, if he was going to be in the Hall of Fame anytime soon.
Are we ever going to see Macho Man Randy Savage in the Hall of Fame?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely.
In the near future? 10 years from now? Is there any kind of timeline on this?
No, I'd say soon. I'm not so sure if it's this year, but it'd be soon.
So it's a yes.
Beg your pardon?
So that's a yes.
That's a yes.
Well, that's good news. I mean, obviously, it's been a crying shame that he hasn't even been in for the longest time. He should have been in ages ago. But to hear, I mean, obviously with the documentary, we knew that there had to be some groundbreaking with him, with the WWE and the Poffo family. So we have to assume, I'd like to think that it's this year. but because this DVD only just recently came out, there's a chance that maybe they already have all the names penciled in. It's possible. So, and it also depends on who's going to be in this year. I mean, if there's already a big guy coming in this year, then you probably want to save Macho Man as a star attraction for next year. You could go a million ways with that. So either way, though, I'm just glad to hear that he is on the list now and will be sooner than later. I mean, if he said maybe not this year, which pretty much almost guarantees the year after that is a guarantee. If he's not on next year, or if he's not on this year, well, technically it's next year because it's in March, but he will be in the next Hall of Fame ceremony, and if he isn't, it will be the one after that for sure. That's what it sounds like to me. The next thing was obviously Stone Cold is still, big friends with good old Jim Ross, former announcer, Hall of Famer, who's going to be doing the New Japan, I can't remember what it's called, but he's going to be doing that New Japan Global Force kind of mashup, and he's going to be announcing that. That's going to be his first announcing gig since leaving WWE, which a lot of us are going to be looking forward to. So obviously Austin asked Vince about, the end to Jim Ross's tenure in WWE.
One of the greatest minds in the business, in my opinion, is Jim Ross, who came from the Bill Watts tree and spent his whole life in the business and is no longer with WWE. Is there heat between you guys?
There's no heat from my standpoint. I think that there was an incident in Los Angeles, which you were a part of, and you, as a matter of fact, stated your opinion as part of that situation. I'd rather not go into it.
Yeah.
Okay. But nonetheless, I think that, it was like, oh, man, you just don't do that. It was very unprofessional and very unlike Jim. Jim and I worked very well together. I like Jim as a human being. He has a lot of institutional knowledge, and I'm not so sure we won't get back together, too. His desire was to leave Connecticut, expletive Connecticut,
right,
and go back to Oklahoma. And that's what Jim wanted to do. Well, Jim really paid his dues with me. And as you know, anyone who works with me, I'd never ask anyone to do anything in the ring I wouldn't do,
right,
or anything, in the office I wouldn't do. And you know that is a fact.
Right.
So JR really, really worked hard. And as everyone does, and contributed greatly. JR decided his own volition, not me. I want to go back to Oklahoma, Vince. I want to take it easy. I want to help some, but that's what I want to do. I don't want to do what I'm doing now.
I mean, it sounds to me like before the whole situation, and for those who don't know what he was talking about, that situation in LA, there was a big panel for the WWE 2K14 game as it was getting soon to launch, and they had a bunch of guys, whether it was ranging from Stone Cold, Ric Flair, who else was there? I can't think off the top of my head who else was on there. I know it was a couple new guys, but I can't think of which ones it was. But I think Sheamus might have been one. Sheamus, Cesaro, maybe. I can't remember. But essentially at that event, one of the big things was Flair was drunk off his ass, which at that point, Flair has been notoriously known for having a lot of problems with drugs and that kind of stuff. And the panel became less about the game and more just about telling stories about things and stuff. And JR, is the guy who was supposed to be running that panel, didn't really bring things back to where it was. Now, a lot of us as fans were sitting back thinking that was so much better than if it was just a panel talking about the game, which to us, yeah, it's cool that there's a game, but I mean, as wrestling fans, you still want to talk about wrestling more than you want to talk about the game. And really, how much could you talk about the game in 45 minutes or whatever? So, and that was apparently what was the fireable offense, is that he didn't take control of this thing. Now, there could be more to it, which is maybe why he said as well, and when Austin asked that question, I really don't want to get into it much. Because, I mean, that's all that we really heard, and we didn't hear much else about it. But, I mean, it's the other idea, too, that he was talking about how Jim just wanted to get out of Stamford in Connecticut and kind of just do a couple of things here and there from his house in Oklahoma, because he... As a lot of guys say, like Jim Cornette, for example, said, Connecticut will make a sane person crazy, or a crazy person will go to Stanford because they're crazy. But that place, obviously, with how hard that they work those guys down there, it probably, and I mean, Jim getting up there in age and with all the other things, I'm sure he's made more than enough money that he could ever last for the rest of his life, and he's done almost anything he could ever want to do. So, and he still loves the business, obviously, because he's doing New Japan. He loves the wrestling business. And when he wanted to get away and, he still wanted to do a couple things here and there, whatever that may have been. But I guess, with Vince being the workhorse that he considers himself to be, that he didn't want anybody, to be kicking back and doing jack shit and still making a pay cut out of it. And then the whole situation with the panel just kind of made it that much easier for them just to let him go. And to this day, it drives me insane because the announcing is still so piss poor on WWE content right now. Other than NXT, and even then, sometimes you have some off days. But it's a shame that we lost Jim Ross to whatever the fuck happened at the panel, whatever they consider was a fireable offense. And it's just a damn shame for all the people that are just getting into the business now, who are just watching the show right now, because they're dealing with just terrible announcing that really are hindering the product. And thank God for the network, so at least if any of these people, they can go back and watch these old matches and see how much better it was called. And I can't wait to watch the New Japan pay-per-view with Ross announcing, just to prove a point on how, even though it's a bunch of people I've never watched before, because this pay-per-view from New Japan is going to be the first time I ever watch any of their stuff. And I guarantee you I'm going to enjoy watching that with the announcing more than I ever would have watched anything with WWE in the last, say, 3 years. Another thing, because of the PG era, that drives people nuts. I mean, obviously we hate the fact that it's bad comedy. There's the stupid shit like the bull with Fernando and Diego, the Los Matadores. You got the bunny with Adam Rose. You had Hornswoggle dressing up as the Gator with Slater Gator, and all this other shit that's making the product seem like it's for fucking babies. Not even children, babies. So another big change that happened is obviously there's no blood. And even to the day, until the Attitude Era, there was kind of like a no blood policy. And Austin kind of goes into this when he talks about the match with Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13. That was the match where he got over with the fans because he was busted open and he did not tap out to the sharpshooter. He passed out. And that's when people started to like the guy. So he talks with Vince about just the idea of what blood is to him and how he reacted to it, especially on that specific match.
What were you thinking with a no-color policy, and all of a sudden you got two guys out there and Stone Cold is bleeding his ass off? Are you madder than a hornet? Because, what were you? Because in your commentary you say, it's unfortunate. Things like this don't happen very often.
I guess maybe, looking back on it, we all have a tendency to rewrite history. But I'm sure I was a little pissed off. And at the same time, it's not about what I want, ever. It's about what the audience wants. So I'm a pretty good listener, as I said before. And when you're listening to the audience and they're going crazy, because of this finish and because of what's happening now, and you've got color and so forth, it's like, man, well, it's like, okay, it's against policy, but listen to the audience. Look what's going on here. So I'm a pretty good listener. So I think that, from a personal standpoint, a company standpoint, I was a bit pissed off because you break the rules. On the other hand, it's what the audience wanted. You gave them what they wanted.
Okay, I know what people are going to be thinking over the course of this interview, how most of it's been negative. And the reason I'm picking up the negative stuff is because that's the easiest stuff to criticize. I could go back and tell all the stories about how they were talking about when Vince was a wrestler, when Vince was talking about how he first got the company, when he talked about his son Shane and what they were up to and all this other shit. But that doesn't mean anything. I mean, that stuff is cool to the hardcore fan, but I want to talk about what's seriously wrong and what needs to be changed based on what I heard. And this is just my own personal opinion, but my opinion is shared by a lot of people out there, especially the hardcore fans, and even a lot of casual fans that are, above the age of 5, as far as I get it. When he says that it doesn't matter what I want, it's what the audience wants, and when blood being one of those things, blood can enhance something very quickly. Obviously, with all the things we've heard about injuries and stuff, I get why at the same time we want to avoid it. But in the sense of creating more drama in a storyline, when you watch a movie, when there is blood, how serious does that shit start getting? When a big fight starts. In the sense of a major, and it's why it's weird when you have these Hell in a Cell matches like crazy, you have the TLC matches, and guys don't bleed. You're taking away the the intensity of those matches by not letting them do that, because now it makes it really look blatant that it's fake. And I know that, in this industry, or in this era of the internet, that pretty much everybody knows that it's fake, and the only ones that don't know are the children that the parents haven't told yet. But in the case of blood, I see no reason why that can't be there in doses. Obviously, I'm more than happy if it's not there on every single night. But in a match where it's meant to be violent, where it's meant to be this big brawl, like when you get those serious angles going on, like the Dean Ambrose-Seth Rollins match in the Hell in a Cell, that should have been a bloody match. That should have been a match where they just beat the holy shit out of each other. And instead it ended up being, it was a good match, but it ended up being a little bit corny because, again, no blood. And then obviously the finish just made it worse. But the thing that I want to just destroy is whenever he says the words, "I do what the people want." Because I can call bullshit on that in so many ways. Because think of how many times the fans voice their opinions. Like when the Adam Rose Bunny stuff goes on, with the Slater Gator stuff, with all these costume characters that just doesn't work anymore, and they are constantly booing it. Then with the Bellas, how no one gives a shit about it, but they do it anyway. The WWE does not care that much about what the people want. They care enough about it to at least get the merch sales and to get them to keep showing up. But at the end of the day, it's their call, and they will do things in spite of what every single person in that audience says. Every single person in that audience, say for example, Adam Rose and the Bunny, which I think is just the dumbest thing. They could go out and every single person in the audience could be chanting, we hate this, or whatever the fuck they'd feel like chanting, and WWE would not stop doing it because they think it's funny, because they think it will get over. Because, again, these are a bunch of old, out-of-touch motherfuckers like Kevin Dunn, Vince McMahon, all these other people who have not moved on and given their spot to somebody else who has a new vision. And they all believe in the fart jokes are funny. Like, Natalie had the fucking farting gimmick for a while. Like, they believe that all this shit's funny, and wrestling ain't funny. Wrestling is not supposed to be funny. And because they think it's sports entertainment, well, guess what? If they want to consider themselves a comedy show, for example, when you compare them to a show like, say, Modern Family, or Blackish, or Community, or Simpsons, Family Guy, all these shows, do they really even hold a fucking candle to these shows? Not even a chance. They'd be lucky to clean the fucking jockstraps of all these shows because their comedy is god-awful. And if they really want comedy so bad, then get guys who are really good at writing comedy. But instead, they want to go off what they think is funny, and unfortunately, what a bunch of idiots in the office in Stamford think are funny is going to be a hell of a lot different than what people here in Canada think is funny, what people down in Texas think is funny, what people out in California think is funny. You're always going to be indifferent to everybody else, but at the very least, when he talks about in the interview how, you try to get something for everybody, and I think that's going to be the next clip, but you try to get something for everyone. Well, clearly it's not like that because it's basically being done for themselves. That's what it feels like some nights. So anyway, speaking of all the things that have changed, then that's the clip that I think it's going to bring up where it talks about how he says, we got to get a little bit of something for everything. We're going to talk about, or at least Austin asked him about, how, what's caused the way that things have changed? Is it maybe because that we become, since the internet and social media and phones and all this stuff, that maybe we're just a little bit, we have less attention span essentially. So he asked him about that.
And now it's more segmented. Is that because, the world has turned into short attention span theater? Because that's what it seems to me when I watch.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's no question about that. Again, it's like from, we don't have conversations anymore. We text, or tweet or whatever the case may be. So it is that, There's a lot of other factors that go into it. But at the same time, I think that, you have a short attention span. Nonetheless, you've got to reach the audience. And when you're out there for 3 hours, you can't reach them all the time. People tune in, they tune out, no matter what it is. We're going back to football, going back to whatever it may be, but nonetheless, they're enjoying the product. Can it get better? That's what I always want to do, is make it better. Am I out of touch? No. Am I 69 years old? Yes.
Okay, well, I don't know if he believes that everybody is, tuning in and out, but I guarantee you most of the hardcore fans like myself, when we actually do turn on Raw, we plan on watching the whole thing. the idea that, yeah, the market is getting a little bit short attention span, but you know how you get them in? You lock them in with good content. Why do you really think that people are watching Game of Thrones, people are watching Walking Dead, people are watching True Detective? Do you really think these people are watching these shows and tuning in and out of it when it's on TV? No. Do you think that people, when they're watching the football game, do they tune in and out? Most of the time, no. Do you think when they're watching UFC, NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, do you think they're really tuning out and changing the channel and watching a bunch of other things? Unless it's a different game in the same sport, no. They only do that with wrestling because the content is hit and miss. You have a 50-50 shot. Sometimes it's fucking long worse than that. But most of the time you have a 50-50 chance. You might as well flip the coin when the next segment starts, and then if it's tails, you change the channel. If it's heads, you watch. Because there is a 50-50 shot that the content you are about to see in this particular segment is either going to be good or absolute shit. That is why they keep changing the channels, because like I've said before during this podcast, that they keep doing things that are good, that would attract their own attention, not the audience. And when you do stuff that is not going to sing very well to the audience, they're going to change the channel, because unlike, football, unlike hockey, unlike, Game of Thrones, they feel like if they change the channel even for but a minute, they might miss something. With Raw, they know, okay, usually segments are maybe 5 to 10 minutes, so, I'll come back in 5 minutes and see what's going on after that. And even if I don't, they'll put it up on YouTube not far long after, so I can quickly watch that and go back to the show. With anything like a live hockey game, any live sport for that matter, or UFC, Game of Thrones, you could miss anything at spur of the moment. Now, obviously, with stuff like Game of Thrones and Walking Dead, when we usually have it on demand, we can just pause and watch it any time. With a live sport, for example, like UFC, you could turn your head for 5 seconds and miss the best knockout ever because it's so unpredictable. WWE has gotten to the point where it is so easy to predict and so easy to figure out when to watch. You always want to watch the start. You always want to watch the end. Everything in between, you can know within the first 10 seconds if you should start watching and whether you should. It's as simple as that. The only way WWE is going to make it better is by being smart and by being very good with their booking. Because the only way you're going to be able to keep that short attention span down is by making content that forces them to not want to change the channel because they are afraid they could miss anything at any moment. And that whether that's a good match, whether that's an interesting angle, whether that's a surprise appearance. Obviously, we had that with The Rock and Mick Foley recently. That's how you get them back in. And when you're just writing throwaway content, which is why a lot of people keep saying the show needs to go back to 2 hours, because clearly 3 hours is too long for them, for this alleged amazing creative writing team to be able to provide 3 entertaining hours of television. Because they always end up booking 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4, sometimes even more than that. They make a bunch of segments that are just throwaways and are uninteresting to anyone and everyone. And the only people that don't get to turn the channel are the people there live because they can't. They could go up and, get a hot dog, but at the end of the day, they're still there and they can't get out of it. So when a bad segment's going on, they're stuck watching it. That's why you hear the booing in a lot of matches, or when they start making up their own chants that have nothing to do with the match, because they're bored, because they hate what they're watching, and they want it to change, but they have no channel they can change to. And Vince also mentions, that he thinks he's out of touch, that he thinks he's not out of touch. So with that in mind, him being, I think he's almost 70 if he isn't already. So Austin obviously asks him, when does he think he'll ever retire?
I got 60 seconds. Right. I always ask you every time I see you, when are you going to give this thing up?
Right. I work as many hours now as I always have. I'm enjoying the business now more than I've always had, and I've always enjoyed it. I'm healthy, not going whatever, and I think I haven't lost a step. Physically, I haven't. Mentally, I don't think I have. Some people think I'm out of touch, but most people who say that, are critics and things of that nature. Right. And again, I listen to the audience, and it's important to listen to the audience. It's important to give them what they want, but how do you know what they want? You've got to try a number of things. Right. I think with NXT, some of the guys that come up from there, they're getting great reactions. Okay, it's going to take them a while, and maybe somewhere down the line, maybe another Stone Cold. And if there is, we're good to go. We're good to go.
I don't know what to say to that for the most part. I mean, I love too when he talks about it, how he's not, losing anything. Like the first thing he always go to is physically, because it's all about the muscle and fitness covers and shit with Vince. But mentally and all that other stuff, like, look, clearly the guy still has the business smarts that, his company is still doing very well for itself. You can say whatever you want about the network, but they're still going to be afloat in the next 10 years, knock on wood. But again, to say that, we're giving the fans what they want. Sometimes, you just got to throw things and, hope something works. They will almost always give you the answers, because on Twitter, they're constantly telling you what they think should be happening. Over, any social media, they're telling that. The biggest thing that just drives me insane is how you really do feel like the crowd will cheer for whatever, and it doesn't matter. We obviously heard in the CM Punk or the interview with Colt Cabana that they had no plans of changing Daniel Bryan over at the time that he had left, and that was just after the Rumble, so that's 2 months before WrestleMania. And clearly it just got to the point where the fans shit on Batista and Randy Orton so much that they realized, fuck, if we put this in the main event, we are going to... Like, that's the way we're going to go off the air. We're going to go off the air with a giant boo. We can't do that. And when he also talked about, you have to keep throwing things out there. Well, unfortunately, you're throwing things out there that you think people will want, not what you think people have been telling you that they want. And that is the greatest mistake that WWE is making right now, where there's no way or no easy way that they're taking an input from the fans. Because at the end of the day, if they claim that what the fans want is what they want to do, why is it that every night there is intense booing, there is intense cheering for the people that they don't want them to cheer for, there is intense chants of things that have nothing to do with the match that's going on? There are so many things that are wrong with this company. Obviously, there's a lot of good things as well. I mean, clearly, like, I could, off the top of my head, NXT has been an unbelievable gem for this company. They're producing, their production, I should say, their production values are just unparalleled. No one makes better video packages than the WWE right now. When they're on, they are on. I look at WWE almost like the Toronto Maple Leafs, for anybody who knows hockey. It's like, when these guys are on and running to the races, holy fuck, are they fun to watch. But then there are just those nights that you just want to put a paper bag over your head and just imagine something else is going on. One of the biggest things that is an embarrassment to this industry, to the wrestling industry, and especially WWE, is that they do not take women seriously still. In an age that in the UFC, women's like MMA is becoming one of the biggest things in the world right now. It's like I said on Twitter the other day, it's like, because with the whole gaming issue, I mean, I'm gonna quickly pull this as well. But I mean, obviously, there's this idea that we can't take women seriously in any and all media. So obviously, we can't take women seriously in wrestling. We can't take them seriously in the gaming industry. We can't take them seriously everywhere else. Where I say, if you really believe that, then why don't you tell it to Ronda Rousey as she beats the holy fucking shit out of you? Right now, in this day and age, Ronda Rousey is a giant figure in this industry, in the entire world for that matter. As one of the toughest motherfuckers out there, and it's a woman. She's a woman, and she is one of the toughest motherfuckers out there. And we still live in an industry, in wrestling, where the women are just throwaways. They don't care about women's wrestling. And there are women in that company that are really good at what they do, but instead we put the belt on someone like Nikki Bella, who, no offense to her, is just terrible at what she does, everything she does. And the only reason that she is holding a belt right now is because she is married to John Cena. Because like I said at the beginning of this, in the middle of this, and I'm going to say it at the end, it's always been about John Cena because he is Vince McMahon's boy. And unfortunately, he may think he's not out of touch, but to anyone, and he can say we're all critics, but we're, at the end of the day, just fans like everybody else. And I believe without a shadow of a doubt that he is beyond out of touch. And this man needs to step away, along with his own regime, with the Kevin Dunns of the world. They all need to go away and allow a new generation of writers, producers, and superstars. Because John Cena is not going to be around much longer. They need new stars. They need to develop them. They need to develop them fast, which means they need to let them flourish, which means they need to let them get over on their own. Not strap the rocket boots to them and not hold them down when they don't want that specific person up. You have to let things be as they are. If the fans want Dolph Ziggler to be a major player, make him a major player and stop fucking with him. If they want Cesaro to do the giant swing because it's over, have him do the giant swing because clearly they loved it. When Zack Ryder got himself over with his internet show and the fans kept wanting him, you give them to them because that will make you money. Because if you do what they want, they will keep coming back. And if they keep coming back, you will keep making money. And if you keep making money, you're in business and you're off to the races. So that's everything that I got for this. This interview was really interesting. Obviously, there was a lot of positive stuff. I really want to stress it out that I not mean to make this like a negative thing. But this is the stuff that we need to be pulling out of this interview. I could literally have just spent the entire time talking about all the cool stories they were telling about how they would pull ribs on each other in the writing team back in the day where they would push guys in the pool, like when Shane snuck up on Vince and did it to him. And all this other stuff about, when Vince was starting out, getting into the ring and doing stuff, how, he got the job as an announcer. There's all these things that went on in this interview as well that you could listen to. And I don't know when it's going to get posted up or if it's literally just going to be on the network. But if you can find access to it, please do. I know I got this on YouTube because, I had seen it on the network, but I didn't know how to get it after that. I didn't want to record it and have the video and everything else. So I just took it off YouTube and converted it to an MP3. If you have the chance to listen to it, please do. It's very interesting because to hear Vince talk, like the way that he did in this interview was very shocking because we wouldn't have ever assumed that would happen. We wanted to think that it was just going to be him being very quiet and being very, dismissive of a lot of stuff. But he even talked about CM Punk, which was shocking to me. But anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And you can like this and leave the comments below. Subscribe to the channel if you feel up to that as well. I don't know if, because of something like this happening, I may end up thinking about maybe pushing the wrestling content off the Radical Rant podcast and making like a shorter show that goes over what's been going on in wrestling, whether it's WWE. Usually won't be TNA because I don't care. But say like Lucha Underground and other stuff. So you never know. I'll think about it, but at this point, things will still stay the same way it is. The Radical Rant Podcast, the next one coming up, will be recorded probably on Friday like it usually does and would pop up either late Friday night or sometime over the weekend. But anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, I shall always be putting this in. You can follow me on Twitter at CSRadical and comment to me over there. Or you can send me an email at csradical@gmail.com. So, with that being said, thanks for listening, and I will see you guys later. Take her easy.